the story of how you came to download the Gene Keys, essentially, how you came to do this work and become the first student of the Gene Keys.
Yeah, well, there's lots of ways to tell the story. Let's see which one comes out. It was, I guess I was building towards it all my younger life. And like I'd had certain experiences when I was younger that kind of told me that, like, that there was electricity in everything. That, I knew as a young boy that there was electricity in everything. And it always seemed weird to me that we powered our cars and our vehicles and things and our houses with this kind of weird stuff that we got out of the earth and burnt, because I just kind of thought it's in the air, it's everywhere, it's in the atoms. I didn't even know what atoms were. Anyway, so I kind of always had that sense. But then in my late 20s, I did have a kind of spontaneous experience of a sort of major altered state, and that's what set off my journey. And I've kind of told the story a lot of times of waking up in my bed and just kind of waking up in a field of sort of higher wisdom that was just not like anything I've ever experienced before or since. Although it did repeat once late, a little bit later for another. I had two of these experiences, but the first one was the most impactful because I was, I guess, 29 years old, and it just sort of shocked me deeply to the core of my being. I wasn't doing any sort of drugs or plant medicine or anything like that. It was just a spontaneous thing, and it happened. I was deeply contemplating sort of the Kabbalah at the time. Actually, for a year I'd been contemplating that, and it kind of just triggered this thing in me. Well, I don't know if it did trigger it, but this event happened. And then for those 3 days, that it lasted 3 days and 3 nights, I kind of was in this other world of, it's hard to explain now, but I sometimes say, whatever I wanted to know, I could know about anything, because my mind was the universal mind. And so I kind of just traveled,
Sounds like you're on mushrooms.
Yeah, it was a much more energetic experience than, because there was just energy pouring through my body, and I can't explain that. It was just pouring through me, and as far as I know, I when I occasionally have taken mushrooms and things, it's never close to that.
Was it something that you asked for to happen?
No, not particularly. I think I was a seeker for sure. But no, I didn't sort of specifically ask for it, or I think I'd yearned for it, and that was what was hard, because after the kind of high came down, it kind of came down off me. Then I was left in this ordinary state again, but I'd been given something. I'd been given a treasure, but I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know what to do with it, and I just knew I was different, and I sort of saw my own life. I kind of remembered the future. I saw my destiny. I kind of saw who I was and all those sort of things at a soul level. But then I just didn't have any details. I didn't know when things would happen, how they would happen, what it would look like. So I've just been living since that day, decision by decision, every day. And it's kind of led to where I am now, and this body of teaching called the Gene Keys. And that came later. It came much later. So I had a long time of just drifting, really, wondering what to do with myself, and through my 30s. And I still was learning, but I just wanted to get back to that state of consciousness, basically. But everything I tried didn't work, So eventually I came to accept it. And with the teacher, and then these teachings came, these Gene Keys, this book I wrote, and then these different things, it all started to make sense. And then it kind of formed a structure, and now it obviously has a community, and it's still an impulse that I'm following. So I guess one way to explain it would be, in those experiences, the doors to the other world were just wide open, completely wide open, and then ever since they've been left a little bit open, ajar. So I can just tune into that stream of wisdom anytime I like, really. If I put my mind to it or my heart to it, then it kind of starts to come through. Not that I can control it, but it just does, sort of, things come. And they sit, but I've now learned, like, I've kind of learned just to be very, very patient. And that's probably been my greatest lesson, and
Yeah.
it's probably one of the most important teachings I kind of have actually for everyone. Be more patient.
I wonder so I've heard you talk about how you were one of the early students of human design as well, and how that helped to mold the gene keys as well. First of all, I want to know, what is your human design?
Oh yeah, well, I'm really careful about saying I am a blank blank, because I think that can be an additional programming over the top of programming we already have. So in layman's terms, in the human design world, I'm a generator, and I hate saying that. Like, immediately you say that for a whole lot of people that know human design. Well, if you don't know human design, it just sounds alien and weird. Right. But if you do know human design, it's immediately a box that everyone kind of puts you in. Oh, yeah, and they have all these ideas about it. And I just think that's there's something dangerous about that.
Yeah, I think there is a blessing and a curse with any label, I suppose, but that's kind of the beauty of your work, that was able to layer on top of that opening of, well, yeah, you can label yourself to start yourself maybe on this journey just to pick a direction, but then
it feels very expansive.
What I also found in human design is that the great value of it wasn't in the types and things, it was in the circuits and in the pathways and in the keys and the gates and things, because that was where the mystery lay for me. And who the founder was, he was a fantastic teacher for me in how to kind of read the codes. So
how would you explain what the gene keys are to someone who has never heard of them?
Sorry, I'm having a cough. Outside, and I've been making a huge bonfire this afternoon, and
cool.
It's kind of all like, how would I introduce the gene keys to someone? I'd say that they're a universal wisdom, and in a way they kind of teach you the art of contemplation and how to apply that to your life. And they do give you a set of data for you to contemplate about yourself, so through a profile called your gene keys hologenetic profile, which is calculated from your date of birth. But that's only one element of the gene keys, one out of many, many elements. So they're a synthesis that's constantly growing. And in a way, they are not, they're loosely based on the ancient I Ching, but they're also a kind of code for life, a wisdom that has a code for life, for all life. And so once you begin to understand how that code works for you and for others, then your life can become a lot easier and more enjoyable and more playful. And it's a great to know more about yourself. And so that's the journey that they invite you on. And it is a journey. They are a journey, so they're not a kind of fixed dogma. They're a journey. They're not. I mean, I differentiate them in a way from human design, because they're not knowledge. They're a living wisdom. So you actually, they don't give you a basis of knowledge. This is who you are. They give you pointers for a journey for you to contemplate. And it's out of that contemplation that your own wisdom comes forth.
So. Do you think that's how they bring about personal transformation and growth, is that you go on this journey of self-discovery and self-exploration?
Yes. Exactly. And I use a term self-illumination, which I rather like, because it means, the idea that you get lit up from within rather than, something outside. So they trigger something inside you, something mysterious, something even a bit magical. And that's, so in that way, they're also slightly harder to explain, because the insight is hidden inside you like a buried treasure, and they're a treasure map. That points you towards that.
Go ahead.
I just was going to say that even in the way that I was introduced to your work, I feel like it's, you've probably been asked to explain it a million times, but if someone listening could just kind of almost close their eyes and just feel the energy of whatever's happening in this conversation, that might be a better way to communicate what this, I think, as you put it, esoteric universal knowledge is all about, like how to explore this part of yourself that's not really nameable or labelable or able to be put into a box. So therefore, it's not easy to actually describe with human words.
No, I mean, the codes you contemplate. They are the universal codes of consciousness. There's 64 of them, just as there's 64, bits of information bits at the core of the universal structure, whether that's in human DNA, where there's 64 codons, or in the space-time continuum, which has a tetrahedral 64-fold structure, or the basis of music, and therefore the whole universe through the 8 octaves of the 64. So they are the codes that hold together the entire universe. So you can apply them into anything in the world, so you can reinterpret them wherever you look through a different lens. And that's what I've been playing with over the last few decades. I've looked at them through human psychology, and then I've looked at them through, the way in which trauma is imprinted in us at birth and childbirth and stuff before that. And then I'm looking at them in, the way that you could read the codes at the moment, considering how they operate when we die, and then when we're born, and then looking at them in nature, and how they appear in nature, in trees and plants and animals and crystals and stars, and and they're the same map that's encoded everywhere. And funnily enough, for many years after I received the gene keys and put this teaching together, I never did plant medicine for years and years and years. Like the middle of my life, it was a family time, and I was just raising a family and with my wife, and that was not my journey at all. And even though I was teaching gene keys, I just didn't go down that path. And then the moment came, I don't know, a few years back, where suddenly there was an event where I could have some plant medicine, like mushrooms. When I took that, then I saw, for the first time, I saw the gene keys at another level.
Oh.
Because I was so full of them. And then that lens allowed me to, I was in a wood, and I literally I could look at every tree around me, and I could tell you what gene key it was and what line it had. And I could just see the whole fabric of the universe mapped in this code.
Wow.
Absolutely. That's everywhere. Look at a leaf, you could look at another person, you could look, and you could see, I can't explain it that easy, but I could see the code imprinted in tiny crystalline forms at every scale. I mean, it's magical.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How cool.
Yeah.
How do you feel that they bring about change in our relationships and our prosperity?
Well, I think prosperity is, let's do relationships. At the moment, I'm running are either of you on my Venus retreat?
No, but we've
I
listened
thought
to
it
a
was
lot
closed.
about it. Yeah.
Well, it is, because it began 4 months ago now, and we're sort of 4 months in. It's a 6-month retreat with, 2,500 people around the world. And we're moving through this sequence called the Venus sequence, which is a series of codes that unlock the patterns of trauma held in our bodies through childhood and even through our ancestral lineage. And so it's a wound map in a way. So it's a really incredible thing. I mean, I don't know any other wound maps of this detail, and they're individual to each of us. So there are stages that we get to contemplate and unlock these doors. And as we begin to unlock them through the gene keys that relate to you, then your awareness starts to penetrate the pattern itself. And the patterns are both, the outermost patterns are mental, so they're mental defense strategies. And then the next layer down are emotional patterns, so they're emotional defense reflexes in the body from childhood, from puberty time, and in different 7-year cycles. And then the deepest patterns lodged in the physical structure of the body itself, the trauma that's held. So as the awareness penetrates through those layers, through your contemplation of your specific Venus sequence, what you're doing is you're pulling out the strings that cause difficulties in our relationships, because all our wounding that comes up in our relationships. So because it's just patterns that we learn to protect our heart, from being hurt, especially when we're very young. And so as we begin to penetrate those deeper and deeper patterns, then our heart begins to open and trust again in itself. And when it starts to do that, then whatever happens on the outside is no longer as disturbing. So if someone yells at you or something, if your heart really loves itself, it's not nearly as affected by that person's, projection of you. So it's a learning to love oneself in that way through layers, and so it's a very precious process. And it's a self-study course. It's online. It's best to do it with others because it's very delicate and it's very sweet, and it really helps to support each other. You guys may have done some of it. But and it eventually brings us down to the core, to our core wound, which is something that we carry in our ancestral DNA. And that's very hidden inside that is essentially our awakening. So, that's a great myth in itself, that our awakening is hidden in our wound, in our suffering, in the heart of our suffering. Yeah. And that sort of sums up the gene key. So that's how we can use it in relationships to understand the patterns, that what I call the shadow patterns that fire between two people or more.
Yeah.
And then I didn't answer prosperity, but if you want me to have a breath.
I was going to just ask you, because you've spent so much of your life now contemplating in this realm, what do you feel is, if you can articulate this, because this is a big question, but I don't know anyone who may have spent more time contemplating it than you, so you're the guy to ask. What is, if you could give everyone listening and me the most, what's the most articulate way you could say that is the purpose we're here? Like, is the reason we are born, and the thing we are here to do, if it's a to do or be or whatever it is.
Yeah, my friend, a good dear friend of mine yesterday asked me a question a bit similar, which I might just also name. It was like, why is there a wound? Why is there suffering? And and it's the same question in a way for me, because I said, look, it's if there wasn't a wound, there would be no life. Because if you think of at the center of every galaxy is a black hole, right? That says it all. Like that, there is this there at the begin, in the middle of creation is a hole, and within, and there are holes within holes within holes, and everything revolves around these essential core wound structures, and we call them wounds, but they're really just like the vacuum itself of space, or the void, and out of the void comes forth life. And so you have to, at the Big Bang and all that, with the Big Bang, there's a splitting of the wholeness, of the oneness, into, well, initially into two, and then instantly into three and four, and billions of fragments, fractals, and out of and each one of those has a hole at the core of it, because it's a holographic patterning that life. So everything has a black hole at its core. Every atom, it's the navel at the core of the universe. It's in the eye. It's everywhere. There's always a core, and it's because of that the duality is seeking back to kind of unify itself again, and that is evolution. That's the meaning of evolution. Evolution is seeking that unity, and as it seeks it, it creates another one, another child, and another child, and another child, and that is life. We're here to create. We're here to create and explore with the children of the whole. And so, in a way, if you could imagine God saying something, the divine saying something, it would be, children, go forth and play in this and explore. And that, for me, is what the purpose of everything is: to explore, to play,
what we're here to do,
and at the same time to follow that rift, to understand it, to understand the wounding and the fractals, and that is also the same thing as playing. It doesn't always seem like it, because we suffer.
Yeah.
But in searching for the suffering, we need to, for the reason for it, we need to see that that's kind of what we're really looking for, is that sense of eternal play. We're eternally here to explore, and it's a big thing, because we've inherited this idea that, I think from our spirituality a bit, actually, that there's an ending. There's something called enlightenment or awakening, and when we get that, we'll be able to rest.
But that just opens more.
And then which is a nice idea. A friend of mine calls it the up and out philosophy. And we've inherited it from the Eastern religions, actually, up and out. And, we escape samsara, and then we're in some blissful state, and we're back in the oneness. And that's not what I perceive. I perceive eternity as eternal exploration, eternal exploration of consciousness exploring itself, which I think is beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's overwhelming. It's so infinite. The binary side of myself, wants to be like, okay, how do I calculate this?
I know.
And then
turn it into work. When he's saying to play, we're turning it into work. Like, we need a to-do list. And it's interesting too, because so many people, you brought up rest, that we'll rest when we get here, but so many people aren't playing because they don't rest so that they have energy to play, so.
We're not resting. We don't pause. That's the central teaching of the art of contemplation, is to know how to pause. And if you know how to pause, you don't feel the need to rest, because you're pausing constantly, because you're not in a hurry. You're not in a spin. You're not desperate to find an answer. You're not desperate to get somewhere. You're not desperate for things to end. The pause gives you the space for the contemplation magic to understand things and to release things and to soften and open. And that's the awakening really is, what we call awakening is a series of softenings. That's what it is.
That really stirred my heart.
Yeah.
Speaking of
Slow
softening,
down.
I wanted to ask, why are relationships a spiritual path? That's, for me, I have to soften a lot in my relationship. That's why I related it.
I think you answered it.
Yeah.
They're the quickest route to remind us to soften, right? Because every time, we enter into a committed relationship, then the nature of that commitment, so powerful commitment, is that it brings up those wound patterns I was talking about earlier. And then we have to go on this journey. If you can move relationships, but it'll just come up again. You can't escape it. So, if you can dig into one relationship and work it through and soften into the trauma and heal it inside your own heart, then you're really on the quickest path, that I think the quickest path to awakening, because you have to, but it's a kind of a wild path. It's untrodden. There's, it's not like there are lots of teachers out there going, this is how you do it. The Venus sequence is very, very unique and useful because it gives you a map of what's going on in your relationships and why things keep happening the way they do. And you can see that and you're like, oh yes, there I go again. And even after years, those patterns still are kind of sometimes there, and we have to go on softening and opening and yielding. And then one day commitment turns into devotion. That's one of the gene keys. It turns into this highest kind of deep relaxation.
Do you feel that it's the same when it comes to relationships with our children?
Yeah, I think it's all relationships. All relationships have this, potential to soften, because as a parent, you also have to learn that. But you have to learn the balance as well. You learn the balance between softening and boundaries, and you have to find that balance. And as a parent, that is the great challenge, is gentleness or gentle firmness, and finding that that healthy pathway. But I would lean more on the gentleness side, because if you lean more on the boundary side, you probably get more problems. I speak as a father, who's learned from experience.
I'm interested to know, your teachers, and I know I've heard some of your story. I know that as you synthesize the work you're doing now around the gene keys, I assume that you probably had all different places that you kind of were seeking as you were going along your journey, and brought all these different factors in to coalesce into what you're doing now and what you've been doing for years now. So much of your work, when we talk about the wound, we talk about what you're doing with the Venus sequence, there's so much of that kind of Jungian psychology in there that we love to talk about on this show. There's even that energetic that polarity, that energetic agility work, all these things they are coalescing in your work. And that's what's really beautiful, is that I feel like, I don't like saying it this way, but I don't have better words for it right now. But the Gene Keys is essentially a new Bible for me, as it were, in a sense, where I can get a lot of that same energy, the same messaging.
It's like an operating manual. Yeah.
Yeah. A life's operating manual for especially for this part of my life, where this is what feels good, to play with those keys, those codes. But I just want to know from you, like, how, as a seeker, as I know a lot of people listening are, I know Jade and I are, what was your process in deciding on where to look and where to look for knowledge, where to absorb what you now brought into the Gene Keys, what you now brought into your message to the world?
Well, I think for me, it was really just about following my intuition. And that's what I've learn to do. And at the moment, funnily enough, I'm embarking on a new set of teachings called the Dream Arc, which are kind of shamanic versions of the Gene Keys, looking at, yeah, it's very other side of the brain, creative right brain, using all the totem animals of different cultures and going into different lineages of shamanic teachings, but, not teaching shamanism, because there are already great shamans out there, but giving a universal flavor to, to follow your intuition down these wormholes, so every symbol is a wormhole, like a bird. Every bird is a part, like there are all these different types of birds in the world, right? And they all have symbolism and meanings inside us. They correspond to something inside us, just as every animal corresponds to something inside us, and every plant corresponds to something. So if we begin to learn to decipher some of those correspondences, then we're beginning to unlock meaning hidden everywhere in nature and in our life, especially in nature, but also everywhere. So you might, on your logo for your brand, you might have a penguin, but you might not actually have thought about, what does the penguin mean? Really, what does it symbolize? And then so it's a portal. And so every creature is a portal like that. And so all the teachings of the Gene Keys and my journey of unraveling them is about trusting your intuition and following your intuition down the rabbit holes. And each, and the Dream Arc especially trains you to really trust your intuition, because it doesn't give you like answers. I mean, it gives you some clues, but you have to decipher the meaning of the icons or the symbols in your life and the events of your life. Or let's say, you've got something going on with your body and your health. Which herb do you take? Which food do you take? The only thing that really can tell you that is your intuition. There's no way that, I mean, you can read 1,000 books and talk to 1,000 healers, and they'll all give you different things. They'll say, you should take this. No, you should take this. And the other one will say, try this. And so the only way you have is your intuition. So
that leads me to ask how you came about honing your own intuition, because I feel like that's one of those places that people feel like, what does that even mean? Intuition, how do I tap into that?
Really good question.
Well, because you spoke so much on contemplation, which is probably a big entrance point of just like slowing down and pausing and listening to what's happening in this vessel that's showing you so much. And, when we talk about human design, it gives you some guide points of how, you use these different motor systems and all this to tap in. I apparently, my human design says I don't have any of those. So I have other ways I feel like I've already found to find my intuition, but I don't feel I'm an expert in any way. And I don't know if anyone ever does. Maybe they do. So for someone who's been in this work for so long and has brought so much light to the world through his work by using his intuition largely, like, is there a way to point people to do that work, to do the intuition part?
I would say, I mean, for me, intuition is like a river, or a pathway. Like a pathway across the wilderness, and the wilderness is the mystery, it's the mystery of not knowing. You go out into the wilderness and there's no paths out there. You're like, up here where I live in Devon, there's this area called Dartmoor, and as soon as you get up onto the moor, there are very few paths, right? So you kind of have to make your own path. I mean, there are some paths, but then you follow the sheep's paths or the wild paths, and intuition's like that. You have to kind of travel across the mystery so you have to you can take in information from other teachers and teachings and things, but ultimately you're going to have to travel on your own, the way that your heart, your intuition, whatever you want to call it, that soul's calling, that kind of knows that's the path I really want to go down, that way. I don't know why I want to go down that path, because it just looks the nicest.
You just feel so drawn.
Feels nice, feels good. And, and if you follow it, it may lead to a disaster, but what you think that disaster is a disaster, but actually turns out to kind of be a great teaching. So your intuition is correct in a way. So it's about really, the more you travel that path of wisdom inside you, the wider it becomes, until you can really, really trust it. but it has to be traveled. It has to be trusted a lot. And often that's an initiation as well, because sometimes you have to say no to things that look really good, or you have to say, usually everyone on the spiritual path will at some point have to go beyond their teacher, and that's very challenging, to be able to go, okay, I love you, I thank you, I now have to go this way, or they even kind of transcend their teacher sometimes, like I can see something beyond this. And so those are pathways of real trust, of expanding into like, whoa, and so contemplation is a wonderful tool, because it gives us the pause necessary so that we can find the right way. And I know that, for instance, human design has all these like kind of, you got to do it this way, you got to do it this way, you got to do it this way. I think that's dangerous, because there's, it's like you've got to find your way. And if those work, if the way that's been shown to you and that works, then that's great, but it might not work. So you've got to find the way for yourself, that works. And that is ultimately, I mean, for me, it's come through doing it. And, like by walking, there's a wonderful statement by St. Augustine: by walking it is solved, solvitur ambulando. It's like only by walking will you know what's right. So you have to go on trusting, those leaps and those decisions and those forks in the path, where you're given a choice and you're like, oh, which one shall I go? Shall I stay with them? Shall I go with, shall I stay in this relationship? Shall I leave this relationship? Whatever the question is, shall I take this job? Shall I take this job? Shall I do this? Shall I do that? It's like a deep inner listening that's needed. So I think that spirit of play is really important, because then you take away the anxiety of like, there's a wrong decision.
But you have to be careful not to go into nihilism too, right? Where it's just like, well, it doesn't even matter what I choose because nothing matters.
There's no mistakes.
Yeah. But life
true.
is happening for me. It's all these, I'm going to say all these cliche sayings, I guess, right now, but life is happening for me and not to me, or choosing is it a no or is it new, and being able to feel the difference and getting to these places and these forks in the road where you get to make those decisions and because you have the free will to, because this is the experience you're given. Yeah. To keep you on that track from falling into that nihilistic view, all is lost anyway. So might as well just, forget about it and not even choose, is almost the way that ends up. Right.
Yeah. Well, that also can be a kind of Zen approach as well. That can be you can look at that in a positive way, choiceless awareness. But you're right. It can be a trap, that gets you off the hook of kind of, morality, for example, so you can kind of, you could go out and kill someone and go, well, that was meant to happen,
Right.
But so it can be a trap. I mean, I've started to see life recently as like a lifetime is like a string, and we're traveling down this string, and we're inside this string, and that there's infinite forks and branches within the string, and so we get that choice, but we're still in the string. So we have both the choice within it, but then we're in the string, and the string is also, it's wrapped around by other strings, so other strings combine, so other relationships, people come in and they entwine around us, and then sometimes we pull them off, and sometimes they get caught in knots, and we have to untangle them, but we're moving always down this string until we die, and then we come out of the string, have a breather, and then go into another string. And there are almost infinite strings of lives. And so as you look down these, and they're wound, and what's happening is, even though you're in one string, you're in your string, you can't always see that you're actually part of an amazing tapestry. You're weaving with this string, this beautiful part around a pattern, and everyone else around you is also partly weaving that pattern. And then you come out of your life and you go back into another one, and there's this incredible tapestry being created, and you don't see that easily when you're in the form. You can see it more clearly when you're out of the body, and then you see it and you're like, because you have to be out of time. Only when you come out of time do things really like make sense. And so in time, everything just looks so confusing sometimes, because we can't see, we can't see it all we can see is this tiny bit in front of us that we're carving, so there's a kind of magic to kind of understanding these things.
Yeah.
And so you touch that place beyond the chaos, that overview almost whenever you take that contemplation time, that pause.
Yeah. Anytime you go into deep contemplation, you enter into that time, you can enter into that timeless space. And that's when wisdom drops in, but you have to sort of have no agenda, a pause can be, deliberate. So you create it, or it can be enforced by life, like we've just had some pauses on the planet.
Yeah.
But lockdowns and things, or it can be just a natural kind of breath where we just go, and a moment of awareness comes back and we're like, oh my God, for like 4 hours, I have not been aware of myself, been doing this job, or I've been worrying about something. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I'm in the pause. And so the more we create those pauses, the more we create the field for what I call pivotal experiences. And pivotal experiences are when you step out of time, and then magic occurs and wisdom drops in, or a breakthrough occurs. And the more of those experiences we have, then the more we enter into the kind of the backdrop of life. So we're both in the foreground, but we're also then in the background as well. We're in the bigger picture. And so I know my Gene Keys book's all very impressive, and it's very long and thick and detailed and deep, but I don't know if you've got my little book on contemplation, you two, but
no, I listened to the video, but
I have one over here, and it's a tiny little book, and it's like, it's the book. It has everything in it. It's a desert island book.
I'm excited to order it.
If you took one book to desert island, this would be the book.
Wow.
It would be one of the books I, would consider, or I probably wouldn't take it because I wrote it, but I might recommend it to someone else because it's so simple, and it describes that pausing, the pivoting, and then what's called the merging. And the merging is when you begin to merge into the field again, but you don't lose your sense of self. In fact, you increase your sense of self within the merged space. And there's a paradox there.
Why do you think we've gone so far away from making that a practice for so many of us?
I think, we've been in a very intense period of evolutionary growth externally, on the external, because that's been part of this epoch. And when you put all the attention on the external, and it's great because it's like we could sit here and talk now.
Yeah.
Whereas before we wouldn't have been able to do that. We'd have had to meet and travel on horses and whatever.
True.
So it's led to like all kinds of amazing things externally, but it's also led to all kinds of problems externally and mental problems internally, anxiety, and all the world's problems. So I think it's been a natural, in a way, process, but it's also now led to its kind of crisis, and so a crisis has enormous potential. Every crisis, talking to a new friend I made recently who's an Aboriginal guy, and he was saying how in their culture, Aboriginal culture in Australia, they have tracked so many world crises over so many thousands and tens of thousands and millions of years, literally, that they're in their stories. It's just like, oh, it's just another one, it's another crisis and that's come. And out of that crisis always comes a breakthrough or a change, and we grow. And so that's what we're at now. We're just in another one. It has a different feel. It has a different set of problems. It's more collective than it's ever been, perhaps. So it has potential for even greater breakthroughs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, throughout this conversation, it seems what's weaving in my mind anyway right now is this idea of everything is the collective conscious, touching the collective conscious at the same time as being able to hold the fact that we seek out and sometimes even cause challenges for us to solve because we're problem solving binary beings, and being able to hold whatever that is. I don't even want to say it's two things because that's very binary to say, hold these parts of ourselves. And it's very gray, because they're kind of conflictual or contradictual, and hold them at the same time and be able to sit still and contemplate it and just be with that. That's what we are and who we are, and not even make it a why we're here, not make it into why we're here. Just this is, and that sentence right there has always been really hard for me. Like, I am, or this is, or just be, because it takes me out of that idea of I've got to do and be calculated and figured out, and walk this path even is a way of saying it. So yeah, just, I mean, for me, I'm taking away from this conversation today a lot of that need to relax and let go of it has to be a certain way. Let go of I have to fit into a box, or let go of I have to do anything at all, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you totally. I understand that, and I when I was talking about these lives as strings, it's like if you look at the whole thing as this tapestry at one level. I mean, this is what I experienced in my altered state in my 20s. Like it was all done. It was like you could as the soul, we get to select which string we want to go down, and then we play in that string, and we go down that string, we get lost in it, and it's part of a lineage that we get involved in, and then we pop out again. And in a way, if you look at all the string, if you were to come out of the time-space continuum of the universe itself and just look in, you'd see that all the strings are already woven. It's like you'd see the whole, you'd see the face of God, actually. But we get to play in the game of time. So it's, from where we are now in our epoch, we think we're right at the cutting edge of like something that hasn't happened yet. And yet everything's happened. And we can kind of come into any one of those strings, past, present, future. There is, we can just choose to play anywhere in the game, and it's eternal. It doesn't end. It's that's what blows the mind. It's eternal. There's an eternal number of weaves in the cosmic beauty, and that's just in this universe, because then there's other eternal universes, so where other tapestries are being woven. The fabric is different. It's got different textures, and we can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
So
what would happen there? What would happen if we took that in? And I mean, what it sounds like is you don't fear death. You don't fear the end of the string. You don't fear, you don't have attachment. And therefore, I think then what, then it's like we're so identified with life, or being alive, or being a string, or whatever you want to call it. We're so attached to our journey.
We are.
It's almost hard to get to that idea.
Yeah. I think, it's like I really do my best to remind people of this other perspective. What's it like to look at life from a timeless perspective, and because Gene Keys is all, I sometimes call it the algorithms of awakening. These codes in the field of the cosmos, and there may be other cosmoses that have different codes. There aren't 64. There are different numbers, and they're just, I suspect there are. But in our cosmos is woven out of this structure. The one that we know, and it works according to those structures. And there's even like wormholes in the code that can twist the code, that can create the miraculous and bend the laws as well. So there are shortcuts in the code as well. So it's infinitely available for us to play in. And right now we're in a part of evolution that in this epoch where we're sort of at the cusp of just discovering lots of new things, as we always are as humanity. But seeing from a kind of far perspective, you're just like, wow, it's quite, I don't know, it's quite medieval here. It's almost like I look at it, I go, wow, we're really quite backward in this phase of our evolution. We still haven't understood this and this and this. So enjoy being in this moment. And also we are at this cusp of a huge breakthrough. The next 100 years is probably going to see one of the biggest shifts in our species and our planetary, and all the strings are about to change. There's going to be a gear shift coming. I think we can feel it. So I think it's, I also think that's why this wisdom came here now, and because it's here to prepare. It's to help people prepare for a world in transition. And, I'm pretty sure that's why it's come.
Yeah.
It's most certainly helping me with transitions in my life. Unbelievably so. I recommend your book to everyone who will listen to me recommend it. Go ahead.
Well, we have one more question before our lightning round. We don't want to take up much more of your time, but I did want to see what you had to say about prosperity, because I feel like we teased our listeners a bit.
Yeah, prosperity. I'm going to do later in this year, I think September or October, one of our virtual retreats on the Pearl, which is about prosperity, and it's open to anyone.
Will you reopen the Venus retreat? Will you have it again, I mean?
I think there will be one. It probably won't be me leading it, but we will definitely be doing them again. And
Okay.
we just do smaller ones, I think, more intimate ones, because I'm kind of doing the big ones at the moment and then redoing them so they're really like completed and finished, and putting all these lovely meditations.
I really want to do the Venus one.
Well, it's definitely going to be, it'll be happening.
Okay, awesome.
But I'm going to do one at the end of the year on the Pearl, which is prosperity. And it doesn't matter which order actually you do them in. And it's really interesting, that one, because it's, true prosperity is a collective phenomenon, and it's also not isolated to just a few areas of our life. It has to be all of our life. So it's more about harmony. But essentially the Pearl is about, the teaching of prosperity is about simplicity. That's the core of it. Like when things become very complicated, then energy starts to drain away and we become more and more stressed. And that's what happens often when people accumulate too much. So you have to discriminate between wealth and prosperity. Wealth is accumulation, and the more you accumulate, the more complexity you accumulate. So you might think having billions and millions of dollars will be great fun, but actually it's hugely complicated for people who have millions, because it creates more and more things to be busy with. And actually that's why there's a myth that the people who are the poorest are the happiest, and I don't want to glamorize poverty at all, but there's a deep truth in that. If you go to tribal societies where they have little, they are generally a much happier group of people than people in the affluent, world. Generally, I mean, that's my experience traveling all around the world. Like, I have seen that for myself, and so I don't want to glamorize it. I really don't. But there's a truth in that simplicity really is beautiful, because it enables us to know what's the true meaning of prosperity. The true meaning of prosperity is about sharing. It's about connection, relationships. It is about having what you need, so depending on your, when you look at your Pearl sequence, you will see in the middle, in the one that's called the Pearl, you will see what is the flavor of your prosperity. So there's only 6, and the first one, the 6 lines they're called. The first one is the line of simplicity, and those really are people who just, their version of prosperity is to live simply. And the second one is recognition, so for some people, it's about recognition. It's about deep friendships that come, deep connections in life, and that's their prosperity. And then the third one is called celebration. And if you have celebration, then you'll probably earn quite a bit of money, because if you want to celebrate, you need to share. You need to, if you want to have a party, you need money to be able to spend on sharing good, food and drink or whatever it is to have a party, right? And the fourth one is, God, what's the fourth one? Charity. It's about giving it away. People that just they only need money to give it away. They only need prosperity because they give it, because prosperity is a flow as opposed to accumulation, which is wealth. So it's all about flow. And so when you have it, you have to give it. So if you're a third line, you celebrate, you spend the money on celebrating. And if the second line, you don't need as much, because what you're not really looking for money, you're looking for recognition. You're looking for that beautiful friendships in your life, that just where there's that effortless connection. And then the fifth line is generosity. It's abundance. It's about being able to kind of help others generate abundance. And the sixth line is back to nature. It's nature. It's like, it's coming back to simplicity. So it's about, it sees further than all the others. So ultimately, prosperity is of the whole organism. Like we can't prosper unless the whole earth prospers, unless everything and everyone prospers. That's the view of the sixth one. So there's all different kind of qualities of prosperity, so it's really interesting to know which one is yours. Not that you can go and create it, but it is a byproduct of you living your purpose and healing your heart. And so that's why in the sequence of the Gene Keys, when you do the Golden Path training, it's not training, the Golden Path journey, you have purpose, partnerships, and then prosperity. So you have, purpose is first, then is love, so you have to heal. So first of all, you anchor in your purpose, then you can be in a relationship clearly, and then you can heal your heart in that relationship. And then once you've healed your heart, or you're healing your heart, and love is beginning to blossom, prosperity is a byproduct. It comes about through sharing through the heart. So it's not the same as wealth. That's the big misnomer. But you may along the journey get a lot of money coming to you, but it's only so that you can use it, share it. If you were that simplicity one, you really wouldn't want it. You'd be like, no, I don't want it. It just makes life harder. I want things simple. I want a simple house. I don't want a big thing. As if you were the third line one, you'd be like, I need a palace. I want people to help share. I want to share it around. I want to, each one has different needs. So, and we're encoded again with those algorithms of prosperity. So if you're following your purpose and you've healed your heart, you get the right prosperity.
Right.
For you.
Yeah. My prosperity said, I unlock my prosperity through my gift of naturalness.
Yeah.
I undermine my prosperity through the shadow of self-obsession, and I thrive best where my knowledge and wisdom is highly respected. Just for our listeners, that's like a taste of what, when you plug in your gene keys.
So you have like a fifth line one there, I think, which is leadership. So your prosperity really is going to be to have an impact on the world, on others. That's what's going to really feel good to you. I mean, when you ask people on their deathbed, and people done inquiries of people dying, what's important to them in their life, they will always say people. They'll always say either people, my relationships, my loved ones, or they'll say a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
A sense of like, not accomplishment in terms of I've achieved something, but I've lived well.
Yeah.
And so those two things are really key to prosperity as well.
Yeah. And it ties into my genius, because my genius was my deepest purpose in life is to manifest the gift of humanity. So I like how they all tie in together. I wanted to also ask you, you said that you can raise the operating frequency of your DNA by a dynamic shift in your attitude. So I wanted to tie this into shadow work and talk a little bit about shadow work with you.
Yeah. So, for those who don't know, every gene key, 64 of them, is a language that we learn for ourselves. And it's a transformational inner language. And so you have a word for each one, a shadow word, and then a gift word, and then a siddhi word. A siddhi is like a divine, it's the highest level frequency. So these are words that represent states of consciousness or stages of consciousness. So you had like the 10th gene key there, which was the shadow is self-obsession, which is about worrying too much about myself or what I'm supposed to be doing, or am I having the right impact, and like, how do I do it? And, just like going around in that, like, oh God, I don't know if I'm good enough.
I need more courses.
Yeah. I don't know if I need to know more. I need to do more. I need to learn more. All of that. It's like, chill. And the gift of the 10th gene key is naturalness, as you said. So out of that sort of spinning of the shadow of self-obsession, of like worrying about things and like trying to understand everything, eventually comes the surrender of like, oh my God, I actually just do it. It all just works out anyway. And I'm actually, and others will see it in you. They go, "Why, you're so good at this. You're so good at that." Like, just, you don't even need to learn. It's there in you. And that's the kind of manifestation of the gift, that flowers out of the shadow. And then the final stage in that one is being. It's the siddhi is being. It's just a pure state of where it's even beyond naturalness. It's just all life is being, and so it allows everyone else to, it doesn't see anything outside naturalness, so there's nothing unnatural from that state of being. Nothing. Even the most unnatural thing is natural, so there's no question at that level, at the highest level of consciousness. It doesn't mean you won't fight an injustice or, take a vaccine or not take a vaccine or what. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that there's a state of consciousness where you're not worried about it, because it's part of the whole tapestry that I was talking about earlier. And that deep in the cells of your being. So any decision you make just comes out of your naturalness. It's like what I was saying, you follow the intuition step by step, and you can't make a wrong decision, because it's coming out of your naturalness. Even if that decision looks like a mistake, that was a natural mistake so that you could learn a specific lesson. So there's an unfolding in every gene key that's specific, that's kind of, that's the process of transformation. And as we kind of unlock the shadow state, as it's revealed to us, through pausing. I mean, that's what will do it for you, Jade. It's, the more often you pause, the more often you'll see that pattern of you thinking too much about things, worrying too much about things, trying to figure it out too much. And then you'll be like, it's a lot simpler. It's a lot simpler when you're just in that pause, because then things just fall into place, or the thing that you've been kind of trying to work out suddenly becomes clear. And the joke will always be on you, because you'll be like, I knew that all along, and it just becomes, life then becomes incredibly simple and clear, because you knew it all along. And then you begin to trust in that state at the beginning of something, instead of having to go through the mistakes and the learning. You kind of go, this feels right. I know it's right. I don't have to doubt it anymore, and then your whole life becomes like that. And that's how you enter into that field of being. And all those siddhis, those higher states of consciousness, they're all really the same state. They just have a slightly different flavor to them, so
that's one of my favorite things about the Gene Keys, is that it really shows how much every shadow hides a gift.
Yeah, it does.
Stuff. Okay, we are past our hour, so I'm going to move us on to our staple questions. I could, of course, pick your brain for hours here. So there's a few short questions we like to ask everyone who comes on the show. The first one is, if you could hug your younger self right now, what would you say?
I'm always hugging my younger self. What would I say? I'd say, well, it's a bit like what I've been saying. Every decision you make is the right decision in life. And, you're going to learn that. And I guess, the most precious thing I'd say is to be gentle with yourself, to learn to be gentle with yourself.
So important. I think you already answered this question, but if you could have the whole world read one book, which would it be?
Well, other than my book on contemplation,
Yeah.
I can't say my own book. I'll go one further. Then I'll go actually, this is a bit of a cop out, but I'd say learn to read the book of nature. Nature actually is the most incredible book. But you have to look at it. You have to listen to it. You have to be out in it, and every leaf and every tree and every blade of grass and every drop of sunlight and water and fire, it has a teaching embedded in it. And if we really, really understand that, like we're, like the indigenous people understand that, that's where we get to the core of the deepest wisdom on this planet. So I kind of, it's a bit of a cop out.
No, not at all.
But I think it's like the one book we need to read the most.
Most people do list a book, but you remind me so much of my best friend, Tom Shadyac. And when we had him on the show, he's been the only other one who hasn't listed a book. His answer was The Sunrise.
Yeah. Good man. Well, The Sun's epic. I'm a sunrise lover as well.
Yeah.
If you could whisper one phrase to everyone on the planet, what would it be?
Well, I think it might be the same as I whispered to myself, my young self, actually, if you don't mind me repeating it.
Yeah.
So people really get it. Be gentle with yourselves, be gentle with yourselves. I have a friend, he's 84, and he says, I said, I asked him, what's it like getting older? And he says it has good sides and bad downsides. And he said the good ones far outweigh the bad. And I said, well, what's the best one? And he says, you're gentle with yourself, much gentler with yourself as you go older.
I love that.
I think that's beautiful.
It is beautiful. It's probably both learned and enforced.
Before we let you go, where can people find you online?
Yeah, they can. I mean, I have obviously genekeys.com is where you can get your Gene Keys profile and start looking at those algorithms and your codes and things, and that's fun, and find out where your prosperity is and what are your wound traumas in your relationships and those kind of things. I've also got, I do it, if you're on the website, and you can go down and click on the when you do the profile, your free profile, make sure you tick the box that says, yes, I'd like to receive your newsletter. And I won't send you lots of crappy advertising newsletters, but you will get one thing every 6 days, which is, I know it sounds a lot, but it's called the Pulse. And in it shows you what is the gene key of the moment of that week. And it always has a little bit of writing and a quote from the book and the latest thing that I'm up to. And it's always the same format. And it gives you the pulse of the cosmos.
Okay, so you're basing the gene key of the week off of like the moon and
the movement of the sun. Yeah.
How cool.
Yeah. And it's really nice, and it's very, very popular, and it has nice infographics, with it and stuff. but that's a nice way to stay in touch with what's going on in my world. And obviously my YouTube channel, which almost every week has something new on it. And I've got a really nice one coming out soon. 3 talks I did with this lovely man called Chris Bash, who is an incredible man, author, professor of history, LSD voyager, someone from that generation, amazing. And we're doing a series of 3. We've done our talks on reincarnation.
Oh, wow.
Contemplating the story of, like I was saying earlier, with the strings and how we move in and out of consciousness, and those are great. So they're coming on the Pulse soon. So
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Beautiful.
Thank
Well,
you.
we are just so thankful to have gotten to speak with you. I know it's a rare occasion that you visit a podcast, so we're really grateful for that.
Yeah.
I like
And we are such huge fans of your work, and I hope that our listeners will now become that as well. It has changed my life dramatically, and
Yeah,
I've only
me
been
too.
reading your book for a couple of years and doing some of the, implementing some of the contemplation really from what I've learned there. So I just appreciate you and the light that you're being in the world. Thank you for being a light.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. It's lovely to meet you, and lots of love to everyone watching as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Whew, that's oh my God, me too. I literally felt like my heart was getting a massage, which is so needed right now. I have felt so just low energy for weeks. And this is the first time that I felt actually like myself. And so also I just kept thinking, this is the type of episode that gets us in the top 50 of the philosophy section all the time. It was so good.
It was so good. I just hope that
I just wish I could have coffee with them every week.
I mean, you know what I mean? Don't you wish he was a family member and you could just be like, okay, look, Richard.
It reminds me of like the medicine Huachuma. Huachuma, it's like when you're taking that plant medicine, you're just like constantly getting loving downloads about how you already are,
Yeah.
And to just, like you said, just pause, have that sacred pause. So good.
That was really just reaffirming, anytime we podcast, I feel really good usually afterward, almost always. We had a couple that were kind of drained us a little more than usual, but this was one where I was like, wow, I can feel, I just feel good. And I don't know what that means for our listeners, but I hope that they also energetically come away from this going like, whoo, like that was, I got to sit
and like to think he's like in another country and we're on video chat and I literally feel like he physically touched my heart. It was so good.
Yeah, I love it.
And I'm super excited to dig into. So for those listening, you can sign up for the first course is free, the Golden Path. And then you can go into like the Venus sequence, which is how you figure out why you get triggered in love, how to recognize it, and then how to like what to apply to it so that you can stop getting triggered there, or how to open more, how to open your heart more in that area.
And it's almost like a relationship retreat and workshop for not just, relationships, romantic relationships and such, which is a huge part of it, but also relationship with yourself and relationship with other, family member, friends, anyone in your life, really just all around how you get triggered, why you get triggered, how to be aware of it, and then how to resolve it. I don't know that our triggers ever go away, but at least you see them coming and then you can watch them going too.
Yeah. You at least become aware of them.
Exactly.
Which is the first step.
All
right, Mercedes, what's your magic trick?
Okay. So I'm glad you moved us on because I could sit here, I think, in this like fun little space thinking about what just happened forever, but I'll do the contemplation on my own. Okay. So my magic today is actually a small little tidbit I got from Richard from listening to him elsewhere. And he gave this tip on that amazing art we call being in relationship. The trick is to keep your thoughts on the porch. Keep your thoughts on the porch. So in other words, if your relationship is the hypothetical house and you think you have something important or powerful to say, you let it hang out on the porch before you bring it in to your partner, right? So you just kind of hold on to it for just a little bit before just blurting it out loud. And he relates it to muddy boots that you'd take off on the porch before going inside. You'd clean them off and then you'd bring them in, or not bring them in at all. Maybe you'd leave them on the porch to dry out. Yeah, he says that oftentimes whatever you wanted to say will shift inside of you and it'll change, or at least this practice will give you the space to see if there's a gentler way to say what you want to say, and maybe a better time too, because it can be said later. I have to remind myself of this all the time. Like I always want to just say what's on my mind.
Oh my gosh,
right
I've never even told myself that before.
That's what I said when I heard this tip. I was like, okay,
Why
Richard.
did that never occur to me?
Right? It feels so urgent because the emotion makes it feel urgent. Your ego self, that part of you that's like, I'm under attack, says like, I need to react now. And the reality is that it can be said later. So you can let it hang out on the porch. It doesn't have to be said right now. So it's important that we use self-discipline. That's another thing he said to me. He was like, I mean, he didn't say it to me because I was like, but basically he said it to me because it hit me. He said, it doesn't have to be said right now. And it's important we have this self-discipline. And I was like, okay, Dad, you're right. So
Dang.
like I said, I'm talking to myself right now more than anyone else. Hopefully others can use this as well. But this is certainly one of my critical.
I know. I feel like I just got a spanking.
Right? Like legit, my husband has said to me probably a million times, like, are you really bringing this up right now? And I'm like, now I am. Now I am.
Oh my God.
Because then you get triggered into, oh, I'm not a priority. Oh, I'm not enough. Oh, I'm not worthy of your time, and that's a whole nother trigger. So if we can remind ourselves before we even say it out loud.
But I love that straightforward direction like that because I'm a very how-to person.
Yeah.
And like, I need it straight like that. And like our therapist, he had said something about what I had been doing. He pointed at the screen. He said, you have got to stop doing that. And it was like, it is really what I needed. It was like for an expert in the field to tell me,
party.
Someone outside of the relationship to look at me and say, you have to stop doing that. And it is what it took. I stopped.
This is why
it's only been a couple days, but I did stop so far.
This is why we pay a person to look at us from the outside and go, okay, I see what's going on here. I'm going to call it out.
Yeah.
You do what you want with that information.
Ooh, that's a good magic trick.
Good. I'm glad you liked it. And what's yours?
Okay. So mine, he talked a lot about nature, and mine is a sun meditation. So I've always loved sun meditations. Paul Chek teaches about it, but I was really drawn into it by this book, Magdalene Manuscript. The writer talks about how in his practice, he goes out into the sun and he pictures his body as a magnet because our bodies are magnets, He pictures his body as a magnet, just absorbing the energy from the sun. And he just says exactly what he wants to receive from the sun. And he says he does that every day when the sun is the strongest. And he just pictures his body becoming light. So also though, like a lot of us are facing some sort of issue, whether it's like poor sleep or poor skin or poor digestion. Like it feels like, we've all got something. So just the reminder that our bodies do want to heal. It just needs the tools. And that sun is a free tool for healing. And, the energy from the sun has been scientifically documented, such as ultraviolet radiation and the primary colors of full spectrum light, to have a very positive effect on our health, our mental health, our physical health, our emotional health. So we can go outside and draw that energy into our body. We just, you can sit, you simply become aware of your body, take that sacred pause, and imagine it as a body of luminous light. Then breathe in a relaxed manner. And I think it's best to not actually do breath work because then you're taking yourself out of the pause. Just breathe in a relaxed manner. And every time you inhale, just feel yourself drawing in the light from the sun into your body. And just imagine your body as like a miniature sun and, as that magnet drawing in that light, and receive whatever it is that you want to receive in that practice.
Beautiful. I'm going to do that right after this show because I'm sitting in a freezing cold room and I can see the sunshine outside. I know that anytime I'm cold all the time, pretty much all the time.
Me too.
So whenever I go walk out into the sun, it's literally just, I'm like,
you feel like,
a flower that's, been cold all night and it just opens up and it's like, yay, receive. So that I feel like I do that without even knowing I'm doing it. Meditating towards the sun. I for sure love the sunshine. I know that sounds so silly to say. And like you're saying, we take it for granted. Like this burning ball of fire in the sky is literally the reason we're here. This is what created our whole evolution,
it's medicine.
We're little photosynthesis we're little plants that just turned into humans.
I know.
I mean, shit, that's the truth. If we didn't
Yeah.
have it, and I harp on vitamin D all the time. Jade's laughing because I'm going on and on. I harp on that thing all the time because people need to be reminded that we have to go outside.
I'm also laughing about your magic trick ones about going out into the sun and looking up at it. And
sun gazing?
Yeah. And I told my boyfriend to do it and he came back in. He was like, his eyes had gotten sunburned.
We have to do it. I told them specific times a day, not direct sunlight into eyeballs.
But it's just like such a metaphor of our relationship.
Yeah. He's like, my eyes are bleeding.
All right, Magic Moppers,
Wow.
Thank you so much for tuning in and taking this journey with us. If this episode held some magic for you, please share it with your friends and family. This would mean so much to us. And don't forget to join us on our Instagram page at The Magic Hour and let us know what your favorite episodes have been so far. We appreciate all of your feedback and really want to know what's lighting you up.
Yes, guys. And I can't tell you how many times both Jade and I have been brought to tears by your reviews.
Mhm.
So when you send us a 5-star review and you say something nice in there, it does not go overlooked. We will see it. And not to mention, we don't get paid to do the show. This is our baby. We absolutely love it. The way we get paid is through your kind words in those reviews. So if this has been of value to you, please, like Jade said, share it with your friends, but write us that review so that other people will also get to see it. That's how Apple decides who to send this to, who to reach this out to. All right, guys, check our podcast library for all our other episodes. They each hold different little nuggets of value. So we hope that there is some sort of inspiration or gold in there for all of you. We love you so much. Thank you for listening. Be alive.